Unit 8, the skeleton, is a look at the anatomy of a single bone and how bones grow and respond to stress. Part A is an introduction. Part B is the anatomy of a single bone. Part C looks at bone growth. And Part D looks at the healing and stress acting on bones. By way of introduction, the functions of the skeleton involve support, movement, protection, mineral reservoir, and that helps to maintain electrolyte balance. It maintains acid-base balance. Hemopoiesis, which is the manufacture of red blood cells. The composition of a skeleton consists of cartilage as well as bone. There are three types of cartilage. Hyaline cartilage found in the embryo, also found in the trachea and in articulations, the white material at the end of a ham bone, for example. Elastic cartilage is found in the pinna, that's what you call your ear, the epiglottis, and the nose. Those structures are flexible. Fibrocartilage is a tougher cartilage found in the intervertebral discs between the vertebrae and the pubic symphysis between the two pubic bones. Bones are classified very simply as long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Sesamoid bones are bones that form within tendons. Patella is a normal sesamoid bone. Wormian bones are the bones that form between the major cranial bones. Let's look at the anatomy of a single bone. This would be the microscopic anatomy and the macroscopic. The end of the bone is called the epiphysis. The shaft of the bone is the diaphysis. An epiphysial line separates the two. It's called the epiphysial plate in the embryo. Spongy bone with trabeculae, that is, bars and rods, and red bone marrow are found in the epiphysis. Compact bone makes up most of the diaphysis of the bone. Articular cartilage is found over the end of the epiphysis. Marrow cavity is filled with a yellow marrow of fatty material. A membrane called periosteum surrounds the bone, and it consists of two layers, an outer fibrous layer that's very tough and continuous with the tendons, and it penetrates the bone with perforating or Sharpie's fibers, so it's firmly attached to the bone. And then there's an inner layer, a cellular layer, and this contains bone cells that produce bone. Many pain nerve endings are found within the periosteum, and so fractures of the bone, tumors, and bone marrow biopsy tend to be very painful. The endosteum is an inner lining of the bone. It consists of reticular connective tissue. It covers all of the internal bone surfaces. Numerous arteries and veins supply the epiphysis, the diaphysis, and the periosteum. A dislocation may rupture some of the vessels supplying the epiphysis, and this may result in a deterioration of the head of the bone. Nerves are located along with the blood vessels. What about the microscopic anatomy? This will be compact bone. It consists of Haversian systems, osteons, which are arrangements of circular bone material around the central canal, the Haversian canal. Canal contains blood vessels, nerves, and lymph vessels. Surrounding the Haversian canal are the circular layers of bone, lamellae. And within that are canoe-shaped spaces called lacunae. Now, the lacunae contain bone cells, osteocytes. Canaliculi are tiny canals extending from the lacunae. Perforating canals, called Volkmann's canals, extend from the outside into the bone, and they contain blood vessels and nerves. In this view, only part of one of the perforating canals was seen. What about bone growth? Part C will describe that. Bone is composed of two components. An organic component makes up roughly 1/3 of the material. It provides tensile or pulling strength. It's 90 to 95% collagen, a very tough protein. And then there's the inorganic components, roughly 2/3 of the material. The inorganic component provides the hardness of the bone. It's consisting of bone salts, calcium and phosphates. We call them hydroxyapatites. Calcium phosphate is one, calcium carbonate is another. Acid can dissolve the bone salts, and when that happens, what remains is the organic component, and the bone becomes flexible. Heat, on the other hand, destroys the protein part, the organic component, and what's left are the bone salts, and the bone becomes brittle. If you were to put a fresh chicken bone in vinegar, after a while, the acid of the vinegar would dissolve the bone, and you could lift it out. It would have the shape of the bone. It might be kind of dark gray in color, but it would be flexible. You could bend it. On the other hand, if you put a fresh chicken leg into a hot oven, it destroys the protein. What's left are the salts, the bone salts. If you carefully lift the bone out, it'll have the shape of the regular bone. It will be hard, but if you drop it, it'll break. It will shatter because it has no strength. To understand bone growth, we need to understand the cells that are involved. Because when you read about bone growth in different sources, it sounds like you're reading a completely different description. So let's start with the cells. Mesenchyme cells are embryonic cells arising from mesoderm. They're a type of stem cell, an embryonic connective tissue cell. Fibroblasts arise from mesenchyme, and these cells lay down collagen fibers. They're mainly found in the weight-bearing long bones. Chondrocytes also arise from mesenchyme, and they form hyaline cartilage. Now, as the cartilage forms, some of it becomes dissolved away, leaving bars of cartilage. This occurs mainly in cranial non-weight-bearing bones. Bone cells include osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. Let's look at the osteoblasts for a moment. These arise from osteoprogenitor cells or osteogenic cells. Those are a type of stem cell, and they make bone by producing collagen fibers along with the fibroblasts. So these cells are crawling around, laying out strands of collagen fibers. They secrete an enzyme called alkaline phosphatase, which causes calcium and phosphate ions to precipitate along the fibers and the bars of cartilage. How does it work? Well, after the chondrocytes have produced bars of cartilage and fibroblasts have produced collagen fibers, the osteoblasts, by secreting the alkaline phosphatase, precipitate the bone salts, the hydroxyapatites, around the bars and cartilage to produce spongy bone. You can imagine in the diagram below, each bar contains inside a strand of fiber or a bar of cartilage. Osteocytes are mature osteoblasts. Notice the osteocyte has a lot of extensions. They're located within the lacunae, and they have long extensions that extend into the canaliculi. They function in some bone buildup and breakdown. They also apparently play a role as strain sensors to detect stress on the bone, and so they would signal other cells to remodel the bone. Osteoclasts, on the other hand, are cells that arise from macrophages, and they destroy bone. They have a ruffled border, lower border in this diagram. They're located in a depression in the bone called a resorption bay. They secrete proteases like acid phosphatase to digest away the collagen, and they secrete citric and lactic acids to dissolve the hydroxyapatite. Then they phagocytize the bone fragments. So you see they break down bone and clean up the mess. Control of bone growth is mainly by control of the osteoclasts, because osteoblast activity is more or less constant and osteoclast activity is variable. Several hormones regulate bone breakdown. There's one called Parathormone, or PH. It comes from the parathyroid glands. It increases osteoclast number and activity, thereby breaking down the bone. And when bone is broken down, what happens to the minerals that are in it? Well, they're dumped into the blood. So parathormone would increase blood calcium levels. Calcitonin from the thyroid gland decreases osteoclast number and activity, and it has the role of decreasing blood calcium, because if breakdown decreases and buildup is continuing constantly, the buildup would require removing calcium from the blood. Calcitonin is a form of vitamin D. It increases osteoclast activity to increase calcium levels, so osteoblasts have calcium available to make strong bones. It increases calcium absorption from the digestive tract, and it's produced from cholesterol in sunlight. A lack of calcitriol causes rickets in children and osteomalacia in adults. There are other factors that influence bone growth, like growth hormone. Ossification is bone formation. It begins around the second month after conception, and it occurs in three ways. One is appositional, on the outside of the bone. From the cellular layer of the periosteum, compact bone is laid down. It increases the diameter or thickness of a bone. Now, while that's happening, the medullary cavity is also increasing in size. Intracartilagenous, or endochondral, forms bone from inside the bone by replacing the bars of cartilage with bone. It produces the spongy bone. It increases the length of long bones, and it's found in most of the weight-bearing bones. And then there's intramembranous. This is very similar to the previous. It forms from within the bone by replacing the connective tissue fibers with bone. It produces spongy bone. It increases the overall size, mainly of the cranial bones. It's found mostly in the non-weight-bearing bones. What does an individual bone grow in diameter and thickness? Well, growth in diameter occurs from the periosteum. Bone salts are deposited, especially around blood vessels, and the result is the formation of osteons, or the Haversian systems, containing blood vessels. These end up inside that Haversian canal. Let's look at an individual long bone and how it grows in length. Originally, the bone is small, and actually it's not bone at all, it's cartilage, shown in blue. Growth is from a primary ossification center in the middle of the bone. Notice bone is in quotes because, again, it's cartilage. The cartilage grows bigger, and cartilage is an ideal embryonic material because it's flexible and can grow rapidly. Bone replaces cartilage, and a marrow cavity begins to form within the bone. A secondary ossification center begins to form near the ends of the bone. Cartilage continues to grow bigger, while bone is replacing cartilage actually faster than the cartilage is growing. Eventually, the growth of the ossification centers leaves a gap of cartilage, the epiphysial plate. Cartilage formation continues, bone formation continues even faster, and at roughly the age of 20, bone meets bone, and the epiphysial plate has become the epiphysial line, and growth in length has stopped. What about healing and stress? A fracture requires healing. Four major types of fractures are an open fracture in which the broken bone sticks through the skin, a commutated fracture in which the bone is crushed or splintered, a green stick fracture which breaks like a twig where one side of the bone breaks and the other does not, and an impacted fracture in which the end of the broken bone is pushed into the other bone. Healing of a fracture is similar to bone growth, and it involves first the formation of a procallus, which is essentially a blood clot, a hematoma. Next, a callus begins to form, and it has these characteristics. Cartilage is produced, fibroblasts move in and begin to secrete fibers, as we described. The callus may be an external callus located outside of the bone, or an internal callus located in the marrow cavity. Both will form to give the healing process great strength. Osteoblasts produce bone salts, resulting in a bony callus. The spongy bone comes first, and compact bone results next. Bone remodeling then occurs, and the callus is resorbed to restore the bone shape. Some bones, however, resorption does not occur as it normally would. Have you ever known someone who broke their collarbone and there was a bump where the break occurred? The collarbone does not tend to resorb the callus if it's broken. Stresses on bones affect bone growth. Compressional stress is the stress due to gravity. Functional stress is the stress due to the pull of the muscles. Also, bone may form in abnormal locations. In soft tissues, it's called a calculus. In arterial walls, it's called arteriosclerosis. Let's look at the effect stresses have on bone growth. We'll look at a functional stress, a stress due to the pull of the muscles. Let's look, in fact, at the bow-legged cowboy. Here's a cross-section of the horse's belly. Also, there's one of the leg bones. As the cowboy rides the horse, over the years, the upper and lower ends of the bone tend to grow toward the horse, and the middle tends to grow away from the horse due to the stresses of the muscles hanging on to the horse. The end result is the bone has grown into a bent shape. And that's a look at the skeleton. You're now ready to progress to Unit 9, Muscle Anatomy.